There is no more rugged breed of man than the New Zealand tunneler, a tough, phlegmatic individual devoted to his craft and dedicated to the task of digging into the earth so that people on the surface can enjoy the benefits of modern science. No tunnel carved through New Zealand earth has been a greater challenge than the giant Tokano project that is part, an essential one, of the Tongariro hydroelectric scheme.
This is Lake Rotorua, and this is where almost all the water comes to for the power scheme.
All the water for the Tongariro power development ends up in this reservoir, Lake Rotorua.
So there's quite a number of tunnels.
Quite a number of tunnels, yeah.
And canals.
Yeah. This is the old industrial complex of the Tongariro power development. For a period of 20 years, this site was a hub of activity. All the steel fabrication, machinery and vehicle maintenance was performed in one of a dozen buildings that used to be situated here. Now, derelict buildings and a few bits of old machinery are all that's left to help us recall the history behind this site. It was in September of 1964 that the government approved the Tongariro power development and ordered the construction to begin immediately. With a projected 32 miles of tunnels and 2 power stations, this was going to be one of the country's biggest ever civil engineering projects. For the next 20 years, a workforce, at times of over 2,000, would reside in the purpose-built town of Turangi and labor to bring this project to completion. The above-ground structures are a testament to the legacy left by the skilled workforce on the Tongariro power development. What few may know is that beneath the forest and rugged topography surrounding Mount Ruapehu is a huge underground power station and over 30 miles of tunnels. It took a workforce of Italians and Kiwis 15 years to build these underground structures, and as a result, the country gained a much-needed new supply of hydroelectric power.
Mount Ruapehu is the key to the water supply.
Absolutely. I mean, it's a very large mountain, of course, and all the water that is shed onto that mountain ends up in the power scheme.
So all the snow melt and water off the mountain that's used in the power schemes is diverted through a tunnel.
All of that water ends up in the tunnel, either on the west side or on the east side of the mountain. It all ends up getting collected into Lake Rotorua, and then from Lake Rotorua it goes through the Tokano tunnel and into the Tokano power station. And don't forget, there's an additional bonus, of course, because all that extra water ends up going down the Waikato River and going through all those power stations. Up until the early 60s, all of the major power projects in New Zealand be done by the public sector. But then obviously with the start of the Tongariro power development, which was going to be a really big chunk of work, a lot of money involved, the private sector showed a lot of interest. They wanted to get involved. So a political decision was made that about half and half of the work would go to the public and to the private sector.
In late 1965, the government invited tenders from New Zealand as well as international companies specifically for tunneling contracts. The government made a controversial choice in awarding the first tunnel contract to a foreign company.
The first private company was Whakapapa. That's an Italian firm. That raised a few eyebrows, of course, because obviously the New Zealand contractors thought that they were going to get it. But it went out to a tendering system, and obviously they must have had the cheapest price. And they had good credentials. They'd done a lot of tunnelling work in Europe.
So the first company to get a contract tunnelling was Whakapapa from Italy.
Yes.
And then a New Zealand company got...
Yes, a New Zealand company, Downer and Associates. That was the Tokano tunnel. And then later on, the Ministry of Works got involved in the Potu tunnel because their tunnelling workforce had built up over the years, and that was a job for the Ministry of Works guys.
The tunnel contract to the Italian firm Whakapapa did not go down well with New Zealand companies or the unions. The Federation of Labour challenged the government policy of importing Italian labour. Finally, an agreement was reached in March of 1967. By mid-year, the Italian consortium began in earnest on the two Whakapapa-Whanganui tunnels.
The tunnel starts in there. It's underneath the screens. The screens hopefully keep the very big boulders from going down the tunnel. This is a stream bed intake. So in other words, the river comes along and drops through this ginormous gully trap and into the tunnel. And the tunnel starts just up there. And this was the original adit, which got them into the tunnel workings, and they worked from there.
This is the Whakapapa tunnel. So this was your tunnel.
Yeah, we done a fair bit without steel. Yeah, Whakapapa tunnel.
So you did quite a bit without doing the steel sets.
Yeah. Good rocks.
The rock was good.
Was holding properly.
Holding properly. And how do you test the rock? How do you know it? It's easy to see that the rock is solid?
Yeah, the way you blast.
The way you blast.
The way you drill it, the way you blast, you find out the rock is good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting, man. And what's this machine here?
The Whakapapa tunnel was a long one. Now I can't remember the length of the tunnel. I can't remember how long was it. It was a long tunnel.
And you worked inside the tunnel?
Yeah. Inside, outside. Depend.
What jobs did you do in the tunnel?
If they need me in the tunnel, I was in the tunnel. Otherwise I was outside doing something else.
Did you do the blasting?
Oh yeah. Oh, blasting every day.
Tell me about the blasting.
I told you about the blasting. Those days I was strong. Today I can't lift up a box of Polari jelly. A box of jelly is 20 kg. I can't lift it up to that anymore. And we were using 6 boxes every shift.
Dangerous?
You got to use your head. Any job is dangerous. But if you know how to do it, it's no problem.
What about things falling?
If it's a bad country, you got to support it with a steel rim, timber and so on. But if the good country, Go. You don't need anything. When the rock is good, get a whip. Get a whip. Push them. Push the boys. But when the rock is bad, keep away from the boys. See?
I remember an occasion we were doing on the bench and the water was coming down and all of a sudden the water sort of stopped, became a bit dirty, and you can hear the timber going crack, crack, crack. So you can, that's the pressure that goes on, and then we sort of went back down to the bottom of it because we were working on the bench. And we stand there and watching the set coming down, twisted and coming down. It was just, if you don't believe it unless you see it, what the pressure means, And it was steel set 150 by 150. And they would just come down just like nothing, all right to the bottom. Then we had to, of course, we had to come back and start it again from further back, and using bigger steel sets and a little bit closer. I remember one occasion we were drilling, always on the bench, and then a lot of a sudden we would find the water, and the pressure of the water put the machine back and myself right back, and ended up on my back.
Once we struck water, we couldn't go ahead. Then, last maybe a week, the tunnel dried themselves out. But then you go, say another 500 meters, no problem, and then water again. Many times the water go, you got the crescent and so on, go inside your gumboot and come out nice and warm.
Was it cold or warm in the tunnel?
Depend. Sometimes freezing and sometimes not.
Sometimes freezing, okay.
In one stage it was cold, you couldn't do any more. Couldn't handle anything, your finger was getting freezing. And kind of wearing the gloves, because after a while even the gloves, they get hard. You can't feel it anymore. Throw it away. Do what you can.
They struck very extreme conditions they were in very hard grey wacky rock, and within feet they encountered this crash zone which was very permeable. The groundwater head was 1,700 feet of pressure, and it was firing the drill rods back down the tunnel from this pressure, and it became highly dangerous. And that caused a major hold-up in the construction of that tunnel, while they put up a bulkhead, as it's called. It's just to seal off the full cross-section of the tunnel. Then they grouted into the country, which is pumping cement, sand, mix into the country to reduce the permeability. And once that was completed, they were able to then go back to more conventional tunnelling methods to get through this particular zone, which only lasted for a few feet.
Now, did the tunnel contractors such as Godolphin have their own engineers on the ground? And
Yes, but they had not experienced that sort of condition either before, nor had we.
Lake Roto'ara is the main reservoir for the diverted water in the power scheme. From Lake Roto'ara, the water enters the Tokano tunnel, which passes through Mount Tahia to the power generating station at Tokano. Mount Tahia is a semi-active volcano. The thermal activity had already played havoc with the above-ground excavations. What the tunnelers found underground provided serious challenges. Downer and Associates a New Zealand company with previous tunneling experience was awarded the contract for the Tokano tunnel. The tunnel superintendent was Vern Swan. Vern trained a whole new generation of New Zealand tunnellers during the Tokano project.
There's some real tunnellers, they were born that way. It's a gift that got given to them, same as I did. You don't know you got that gift until something happens normally. And there's always aftermath, you wish you'd done this and you wish you'd done that. But when you do the right thing, you don't hear nothing, because the guys are all alive.
He's a good jogger, Swan. He's straight up and down. You know, he doesn't, no mucking around, no nothing. He doesn't, if you don't shape up well, you know, he'll tell you straight.
Oh, Vern Swan made the biggest mistake in his life when he gave me a job. I think he still regrets it. A lot of people were terrified. They started trembling when they seen him.
Yeah, he's a good man all around. Oh yes, Swan was always top class tunneler, looked after his men. And
I knew everybody that was on that work crew. I knew the mediocre ones, I knew the ones that would give me a fair go. And I always told them, if anyone can beat me, I'll work for them. I wouldn't ask any miner or any tunneler to do something that I would not do myself. When we started tunnelling, we had reasonably good rock, well shale rock, but we had to support it. And then we hit the volcano, and we were working in extreme conditions of heat and humidity. And I prayed for water sometimes to cool the goddamn place down so we could work.
Oh, the heat when we first hit that hot water, man, it was stifling. Yeah.
when we run into those conditions, it was really, really tough. Working in the sauna probably describes it best. But we got over it.
The crews used to have cold water squirting on top of themselves, you know, to spray themselves with cool water to keep the body cool enough to make it a bit more bearable working.
It's worse than being out in a hot day out in the sun because of, you know, the humidity, you know. But you got through it all right, knock off and drink plenty of beer and fucking ready for the next day.
A lot of fellas did, they did lose weight a bit, you know, because it took them 3 months to get through all that. So they did lose, you know, you sweat a lot, but, you know, the fellas didn't mind that, they were all right. Some of them might have needed thinning down anyway.
And, well, they had to shut all the concrete and that down, back staff, until they carried on and come to cold water to cool it down.
Because when they blasted it, the water just shot out, and it was hot water. So they knew straight away, well, this is not very good. And now after it, that's when the whole thing collapsed.
The ears and eyes of the experienced tunnel superintendent, Vern Swan, alerted him to the potential danger. He pulled his crew back in the nick of time. No one was hurt. His crew would go back to work the next day as if nothing happened. Tunneling is an endless process of blasting and then mucking out, which is the removal of the blasted material with a machine called the Conway mucker. Tunnel progress is determined by the speed of this procedure. Pat Hayes was considered to be one of the best mucker operators in the world. He brought this reputation with him to Turangi after years in the Manapuri tunnel. His workmates in the Tokano tunnel held him in high esteem.
He was a mucker driver, Pat. He's muck all the rocks and that out, and that was his job. He was a very, very good operator, Pat Hayes. Because on those muckers that they had down in the Conways, they called them, they're not easy to operate, you know.
You worked with Pat Hayes?
I did work with Pat Hayes, and it was I'd say one of the pleasures in life. One of the nicest men I'd ever met. My dad actually introduced me to him. In my tunnelling days out here at Rangipo, he was my mentor, I suppose, because he taught me how to drive the muckers. And he was a very, very good mucker driver. He had a world record for driving a Conway.
Now, when you say he had a world record, what did that mean?
Well, the Conway was an electric mucker, and everything was driven by chain, and it was the noisiest, biggest, ugliest thing you could ever see. But because it was all driven with your feet, you had to stand on pedals, and so you were like an octopus. And Pat was just natural on it. He was brilliant on it.
So there's quite a skill involved.
Very
in
much so.
driving this
Yes,
thing.
very much so.
Yes.
That he had a world record. He could muck out a face unbelievably fast.
It's all done by feeling. Pressing a lever here and pressing a lever there. We're all doing it all by feeling. Every job was timed. The drilling was timed. Loading was timed. The mucking operation was all written down on times. And if your time wasn't up to scratch, they let you know. And I'd like my times to be less than anyone else's. As far as being the best in the world, that was Downers. That's what Downers sort of me, but worldwide I don't think I am really. There's a lot of good operators around.
Tell me about the hole through.
The hole through?
You know, the excitement. I mean, yeah, just tell me about the day of the hole through.
Yeah, well, our shift missed it. You know, there was a few wages and they used to say what time in it, but other fellas were too tired around, you know, they bloody, you know, they pull a short round, so their mates on the next shift will get the hole through. I think a fellow Manu, Winatana, I think he was the first to go through the hole. Yeah, he was from up Mahia.
So you sort of rigged it a little bit.
Oh, not me. But other, yes. But they were like they had the camera there and whatever, you know. Like, there's a lot of publicity.